the single key is shared between the sender and receiver. Then what kind of key? After applying encryption algorithm, whatever the data I'm going to get, the size of the data is same. Hash function is nothing but the mathematical function that converts the numerical input value to other compressed numerical value. Hello to all, a warm welcome to my new session on network security. I'm Revati, faculty, Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram, first grade college, Temple of Excellence, MYSURU. Before going to start my today's session, let me to recall the things what we learned in my previous session. In my previous session, we had discussion regarding network services and mechanism. There we learned what is ITU and what is the standard provided by ITU. So what is ITU? That is International Telecommunication Union Standardization Sector. They provide some standard for network security service as well as mechanism. And what is the standard name? That is nothing but X.800. So these X.800 provides 5 different security service, that is data confidentiality, data integrity, authentication, non-repudiation and access control. Then we had discussion regarding the relationship between security services as well as security mechanism. But in my today's session, I'm going to discuss technique. That means what are the different kinds of techniques I'm going to have to provide security for my data. So what is the topic I have today? That is nothing but technique, and this is the very important topic. So what is technique here? Here technique is nothing but the actual implementation of security goals, that is needs some technique. That means to implement certain kind of security, I must need certain technique. What are the different techniques I'm going to have? That is none other than one is very general, that is cryptography, and another one I'm going to have a very specific technique, that is stegnography. So dear student, just remember that the general technique to provide security for the data, I have cryptography, and to provide the security for the data, I have specific technique, that is stegnography. Moving further, I'm going to have cryptography. So what is cryptography and from where I got the word cryptography? So here I got the word cryptography from the Greek word. That means the word cryptography, which is originated from the Greek word. And what is the meaning? That is nothing but secret writing. So what is cryptography? Here cryptography is nothing but secret writing. So here the cryptography refers to the science and art. That means to write secret writing, what mechanism I'm going to use? That is nothing but the science and art. I'm going to combine science and art together to write the data secretly. So here cryptography refers to the science as well as art of transferring message to make them secure and protected to the attack. In the past, we are going to have only the two kinds of cryptography, that is symmetric key cryptography and asymmetric key cryptography. But nowadays, we are going to have three different kinds of cryptography, that is symmetric key cryptography, asymmetric key cryptography. Along with that, I'm going to have hashing. So, what is cryptography? That is nothing but the secret writing. Why I required secret writing? To provide the data confidentiality. So what is data confidentiality? That is nothing but encipherment. That is, here I have symmetric key encipherment. Then I'm going to have asymmetric key encipherment. Then I'm going to have hashing. Moving further, at the beginning, I'm going to have symmetric key hashing. So what is symmetric key? So here the symmetric key encipherment is also called secret key encipherment or secret key cryptography. So what is secret key? The single key is shared between the sender and receiver. Then what kind of key? That is nothing but the private key. So the symmetric key cipherment uses single secret key for encrypting and decrypting. That means the single key is used by the sender to encrypt the data and the same key is used by the receiver to decrypt the data. And the encryption and decryption can be thought of as electronic locking. So, why I required encryption and decryption in order to lock the data. Then what kind of data that is? Electronic data. Now, by applying encryption or decryption technique, I'm going to lock the data. That is called electronic locking. Now, I'm going to have the small example to illustrate the concept of symmetric key encryption. As I told, it is symmetric key encryption or secret key encryption. And what kind of key? That is private key. That means the same key is used by the both the party. So that is sender as well as receiver. That means the sender is going to use the private key to encrypt the data, and in the other side, that is in the receiving side, the receiver is going to use the same key to decrypt the data. For example, consider that the sender is going to have the data and which is in the form of plain text. Now the sender wants to send the data to the receiver, but they cannot trust the network. So what they will do? They are going to provide some security for the data. To provide the security for the data, what they will do? They are going to use encryption technique. In encryption, they are going to use symmetric key encryption. That means the single key is shared between the sender and receiver. So what they will do? They are going to apply encryption algorithm. After applying encryption algorithm, they are going to get the cipher text. So what is cipher text? That is masked or converted data. So this kind of data is called secret writing. So after applying encryption algorithm, I'm going to get the cipher text. Now what the sender will do? Sender is going to send those data to the receiver, and in the receiving side, the receiver is going to receive the cipher text. Now what they are going to do? That is, they are going to decrypt the data. To decrypt the data, what they want? Once again, they want the key, and the same key is shared between sender as well as the receiver. Now the receiver is going to have the key. With the help of key, they are going to decrypt the data. After decrypting data, they are going to get the plain text. This is the way they can able to provide the security for the data. Then I'm going to have another type, that is asymmetric key encryption. So here the name itself indicates that we are going to have two different key. That means to encrypt the data, we are going to have one separate key, and to decrypt the data, we are going to have another key. So the asymmetric key encipherment is also called asymmetric cryptography, and which is called public key cryptography or public key encipherment. So here going to have two key, one is private key and one is public key. So the asymmetric key encipherment is called public key encipherment. In this, we can have two keys, that is public key and private key. Now with the example, let's see the uses of public key as well as private key. So this is the example I'm going to have. As the technique name itself indicates that I'm going to have two different keys. One key is used to encrypt the data and one key is used to decrypt the data. So dear students, just remember carefully that to decrypt the data, I'm going to have the secret key. So what is secret key? That is nothing but private key. So to decrypt the data, that means in the receiver side, I'm going to use the private key, and in the sender side, I'm going to use the public key. That means to encrypt the data, I'm going to use the public key. Then I'm going to encrypt the data. So after encrypting the data, what I will get? I'm going to get the ciphertext, and I'm going to send those ciphertext to the receiver. And in the receiver side, to decrypt the data, what I will do? I'm going to use the private key of the receiver. So just remember here, I'm going to use the private key of the receiver and I'm going to decrypt it. After decrypting, I'm going to get the plain text. So dear student, just remember that in the sender side, I'm going to have the public key. That means in the encryption algorithm, I'm going to use the public key, and in the decryption algorithm, I'm going to use the private key. So this is the difference between asymmetric key encryption and symmetric key encryption. Moving further, I'm going to have some of the difference between symmetric key encryption and asymmetric key encryption. Based on the characteristics, I'm going to have the difference between symmetric key cryptography and asymmetric key cryptography. So at the beginning, I'm going to have the key used for encryption and decryption. That is, the single key or same key is used by the sender as well as receiver in the symmetric key encryption, whereas in the asymmetric key encryption, the sender is going to use public key, whereas the receiver is going to use private key. That means both the parties are going to use two different keys. Then the another characteristics here is speed. The speed of the symmetric encryption is very fast, which is compared to asymmetric encryption. So here the asymmetric algorithms are very slow. Then I'm going to have the another characteristics, that is known keys. That means in the symmetric key encryption, the single key is known by the sender as well as receiver. That means to encrypt and decrypt, you are going to use only one key, and which is known by the sender as well as receiver. But in the asymmetric key encryption, one of the keys is known by the two parties in public key encryption. That means the public key is known by the two parties, that is the sender as well as the receiver. Then the size of resulting encryption text. Here in the symmetric key encryption, the size of the resulting encryption text, that is usually same as or less than the original plain text. That means after applying encryption algorithm, whatever the data I'm going to get, the size of the data is same or less than the plain text. But in the asymmetric cryptography, the size of the data is always more than plain text. That means after applying cryptography algorithm, I'm going to get the ciphertext. But the size of the ciphertext is always greater than plain text in the asymmetric key encryption. Then I'm going to have the usage. That means where I'm going to use the symmetric key cryptography, that is to provide the data confidentiality, I'm going to use symmetric key encryption, whereas to provide the data confidentiality as well as digital signature, I'm going to use the asymmetric key encryption. So this is the difference between symmetric key as well as asymmetric key encryption. Moving further, I'm going to have the hashing. So this is the third type, that is hashing. So what is hashing? Why I required hashing? To convert the variable length data into some fixed length, I'm going to use hashing. That means by using hash technology, I can able to convert the variable length message into the fixed length digest. That is fixed length message digest. That means think that you have message digest, that is nothing but the data, and you want to convert your variable length data into fixed length, then you can able to use hash technology. So here the digest is normally much smaller than the message. So the size of the digest is always very smaller than the message. The hash functions are extremely useful and appear in almost all information security application. That means nowadays to provide this security, we are going to use the hash function. So a hash function is nothing but the mathematical function. So to convert your variable length of data to the fixed length data, what I will do, I'm going to use hash function. So what is hash function here? Your hash function is nothing but the mathematical function that converts the numerical input value to other compressed numerical value. That means by applying hash function, you can able to convert your numerical value to some other compressed numerical value. To convert the numerical value to compressed numerical value, what I'm going to use? That is, I'm going to apply the mathematical function. So what is mathematical function? That is nothing but the hash function. The values returned by the hash function is called digest or hash value. That means after applying hash function, whatever the result I'm going to get, that is called digest, or it is called hash value. So this is all about the hashing. So what is hashing here? That is to convert the variable length message into fixed length message. I'm going to use the hash function. So what is hashing? That is nothing but the mathematical function. When I apply mathematical function, I'm going to convert the numerical values to the compressed numerical value. So these kind of functions are called hash function, and these functions are useful for both message as well as digest. So here the hashing is used to provide check value. That means where I'm going to use the check value, that is in the data integrity. That means whenever I want to provide the data integrity, how I can able to provide, that is with the help of check values. So here hash functions are used to provide the check value, which is used to provide data integrity. So this is the way you can able to use the hash function. Then I'm going to have stegnography. So the stegnography is also came from the Greek word, and what is the meaning here? That is covered writing. So what is the meaning here? The meaning here is it is covered writing, in contrast with cryptography, which is secret writing. So cryptography is nothing but secret writing, whereas stegnography is nothing but covered writing. And cryptography means concealing the content of the message by enciphering, whereas the stegnography means concealing the message itself by covering with something else. That means in the stegnography, we are going to embed the data with the audio files, video files, or image. That means we are going to cover the data. So the covered writing itself called stegnography, and these are used for specific occasion. So these are the some different type of techniques we are going to have under network security. So here we are going to have cryptography as well as stegnography. So cryptography is nothing but secret writing, whereas the stegnography is nothing but covered writing. So what is covered? We are going to cover the data. That means we are going to embed the data with the file. That means it may be audio file, video file, image, etc. to provide the security. So this is all the way you can able to provide the security for your data. So dear student, in my next session, I'm going to deal with the security systems development life cycle. That means what are the phases I'm going to have to develop the security system. That is security system development life cycle. Dear student, in my today's session, we discussed what is cryptography. Under cryptography, we discussed symmetric key, asymmetric key, and hashing. And at the end, we discussed what is stegnography. So dear student, in my today's session, you got more information about the technique which comes under network security. Dear student, let's meet in the next session with some more information about network security. Until then, keep watching and keep learning. Thank you.